morning. This is the Weber County Commission meeting on this, the Tuesday, the 25th day of May, 2021. It's just after 10 o'clock. We're sorry for our tardiness. Our Pledge of Allegiance this morning will be led by Charlie Ewert. Our invocation will be given by Mr. Rick Grover, and I'll have the thought of the day. We'll move to that point. Mr. Ewert.
Please stand and repeat the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the opportunity which we have to meet in these favorable circumstances. We're thankful for the freedoms that we possess, and we're thankful for our ancestors who have preserved this freedom for us. And we're grateful for the opportunity this coming week to remember our ancestors. And we're thankful to be able to live in this country and the freedoms that we possess because of them. Pray that may be with our leaders this day as they discuss matters pertaining to our county, that they might be guided and directed. Grateful for, again, all we do have, and we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Grover. Appreciate that. Commissioners, we welcome those of you who are here in our chambers today. We welcome those of you who are online. We're glad you've chosen to participate in your local government. My thought for the day is rather simple. 2 weeks ago, after our commission meeting last week, in the Ogden Eccles Conference Center live, we did what was called a State of the County, similar like a State of the Nation or a State of the Government. But we did it this time participating with all the departments. Every department had a chance to talk about what they did. So normally as the chair, in this case, I would have given that address and it would have gone for however long that would have gone. Instead, what we had is we had people or department heads prepare their own videos, and they're live. You can view those on our website or on YouTube. Just go to Weber County State of the County or Weber County 2021, and you'll find that listed from 2 weeks ago there. It was a wonderful experience, May 11th. It was very well received, and what it does is it talks about the different things that Weber County government does, and it's told right out of the mouths of those who do it. Very insightful, very informative, and it'll be projects that'll live for a long, long time. We're really excited about that, so we encourage you to do that. You know, one of the things that we've focused on for the last 3, 4, 5 years is public outreach, is to be transparent. It was reported, and the video confirms it, even our treasurer's office saw 1.9 million hits to our website. 1.9 million hits. Those are people who don't have to come into the office because they can do their business now from the comfort of their own chair at home, which was really helpful during the pandemic. Saved a lot of people a lot of time. We have more interaction based on these meetings and the other meetings we do right now on our social media pages. We have more interaction in Weber County than does Davis, Salt Lake, and Utah counties combined. That's a tribute to all those people here who have chosen to make their career as public servants for Weber County. We're grateful to them, and we're grateful that what you do. And many of you are here today, and Marty and Sean, and I know of our human resource, but the other elected officials who are here and those who work there. We really appreciate your service. Recently, we did another thing, too, is we introduced a magazine. This magazine was distributed all along the western part of the county. Those articles, we put out nearly 16,000 of them. Very inexpensive, and it got a lot of the words of the things that we were doing. In essence, this project, we hope, will eventually save the county $110,000 annually just because of the way we message and how we're doing business. And so it's really positive. So, Commissioners, we appreciate your support on that. I know that it's a different way of doing business, but that different way of doing business is different today. We don't ride our horses and I don't imagine anybody in the audience hitched their horse to a post out front today. I imagine most people drove. Some may have taken public transportation, and again, some are choosing to view these meetings today via Zoom or virtually. It's just a different way we do business, and as we adapt, we'll be more responsible for government. So, Commissioners, any comments based on those?
Very much.
Commissioner Jenkins?
Great comment.
Commissioners, because of the heaviness of our agenda today, we've got a lot of things going. We have some public hearings. As it relates to public hearing, I'd like to take our public comment section of this agenda today and move it between items H and I on our agenda today. How would you feel about that? And if so, I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Have a motion? Great. So a motion to second. All in favor? Aye. Aye, great. We'll move those public comments to there. We'll then go to our consent items. Item F, like Foxtrot on our agenda, which is a request for approval to ratify warrants 3865 through and including 3866 and 458,719 through and including 458,870 and 84 in the amount of $1,403,696.14 dated this the 18th of May, 2021. Item 2 is a request for approval of warrants 3887 through and including 3927 and 45887 through 459,141 and 89 and 90 in the amount of $3,286,106.12. Item 3 is a request for approval of purchase orders in the amount of $1,803,938.41. Item 4 is a request for approval of the minutes regarding the meeting held on May 11th, 2021. Item 5 is a request for approval of a retirement agreement by and between Weber County and Kristen Jorgensen. I'm sorry, Commissioners, I hired Chris. She's been a wonderful person out there at the Golden Spike. Ran our box office for years. Item 6 is a request for the approval of a new business license. Item 7 is a request for the Weber County Health Department for approval to surplus a stackable chair and an HP LaserJet printer. Item 8 is a request for Weber County Tax Review Committee for approval of a 2021 tax sale extension request for Juan Espinoza on parcels 04, 040, 0042, and 04, 040, 0043. Tax Review Committee unanimously recommend that approval. Item 9 is a request for the Weber County Tax Review Committee for approval of 2021 tax sale extension request for Keith and Shane Bitten on parcel 09, 086, 0037. Tax Review Committee unanimously recommended that approval. Item 10, Commissioners, is a request for approval of a contract by and between Weber County and Utah Department of Health to house a state-owned cold storage trailer on the Weber County Sheriff's Office property. Item 11 is a request for approval of the following ramp contracts projects. Approval on March the 2nd. The first one is the Boys and Girls Club to create the at the Club 2021. The second one on that is the Onstage Ogden 2021 season. Third one on this, and there's quite a list of them here. Please indulge me as I finish. Ogden Dynasty Park and Museum, the Education and Technology. The next one is the Ogden Dyno Park and Museum for Animatronics. The next one is the Youth Impact, Impacting Arts Program. The next one is the Treehouse Children's Museum, cover to cover. The next one, Treehouse Children's Museum for Planting Seeds. The next one, South Ogden City for the Club Heights Park Phase 2. After that, the Club South Ogden City, the South Ogden Days Entertainment. Following them is Weber State University Foundation for theater screens, and then Weber State University Foundation for the Strings Project. The next 5 are Hooper City. Hooper City, their park benches, historical markers, the pavilion, pickleball and basketball courts, and the playground. Following that's West Haven City regarding their rodeo. The next one is the Project Success Coalition for the festival. The next 2 are Far West City. First one is the Triangular Playground, and the next one are pickleball courts. The next one is the Good Company Theater, the 2021 season. After that, the Trails Foundation of Northern Utah, trail maintenance and building. The next 3 are the Ogden Friends of Acoustic Music. The first one is the Ogden Music Festival 2021. The second one is Dia de los Muertos concert. The next one is the Instrument Project. The next 2 are Washington Terrace City. The first one is the Horseshoe Pits Lighting and then park tree restoration, and then following that, the last one on the list, there's the Mountain Arts and Music Solar System Garden. You've seen many of those things on there, Commissioners. I'll entertain any questions or comments concerning that lengthy list that we have, and many of them are rant project on the consent items. Commissioner Jenkins, I'll go to you first, sir.
Thank you. On the warrants, I hate the way they list these because they don't tell you what you want to know. But so the very first page of the first one, there's two under there listed the standard and talk about employee life, critical illness, short term. What is the standard? You know,
Looking over at our purchasing officer.
okay. Since it was life and illness and disability, I wondered if it wasn't. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they are employee insurance providers.
Okay, I have no problem with that. And the other question I had was Creative Times Day School for $149,000. Why would we be giving the day school?
Mr. Wilkinson?
CTI Construction who does the park. Who finished the park.
Oh, that's,
That's what Creative Times is.
okay. Thank you. By the way, I parked in our stall this morning. Pulled right in there, it was good.
So that's a parking lot, that's what that stands for. Thank you. Commissioner Jenkins, any other questions, sir?
No more.
Great. Commissioner Frohr?
None for me, Mr. Chair.
Great. Lynn, welcome. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Highlights for public awareness. We had 45 purchase orders for $1.8 million. The largest of these, 37%, or $659,000 to paramedics for a heavy rescue unit, 24%, or $426,000 for a new HR and payroll system, 12%, or $222,000 to Golden Spike, repaving the north parking lot, and 10%, or $180,000 to roads for chip and tack oil. We had 2 rounds of warrants. First of these from the week of May 18th, 179 warrants totaling $1.4 million, 35%, or $489,000 to the transfer station for disposal fees, 11%, or $156,000 for Weber Center parking lot construction, and 11%, or $148,000 to roads for bridge repairs. All others were less than 10%. 314 warrants totaling $3.3 million. Largest of these, 29%, or $966,000, also for paramedic, heavy rescue unit, and labor. 23%, or $745,000 for employee health insurance, and 12%, or $393,000 to the jail for nursing services. All others less than 10%.
Thanks, Commissioners. After running multiple facilities, you'll know and you'll see that many of the expenses there, big expenses with running facilities, are roofs, parking lots, and HVAC systems. You'll spend a lot of money for them, and you'll spend a lot of money maintaining them, and you spend even more if you don't. So, questions on any of those before I accept a motion? Hearing none, then I'll go to that.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve consent items. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I'll second that.
Right, those are the consent items, F, like Foxtrot, 1 through and including 11 completely. I'll place that motion for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. Now we'll be on to our action items, Commissioners. Our action items are G, like golf. The first one is a request for approval of a resolution. It's resolution number 20 of the Weber County Commissioners, Weber County appointing members to the Ogden Valley Planning Commission. Our presenter today is Mr. Rick Grover. Mr. Grover,
Good morning, Commissioners.
great to have you here. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
We have 2 spots available on the Ogden City, or the Ogden Valley Planning Commission. Chris Hogue and Steve Waldrop. They've served a great few years on the Planning Commission.
If you could speak up to Mr. Grover, thanks.
Bet. They've served a great time on the Planning Commission, but due to work conflicts and other schedules that they have, they need to resign. We have 7 individuals who are here for your consideration: Justin Torman, Laura Warburton, Mark Kendall, Matt Carden, Rex Mumford, Trevor Schumann, and Susanna Hansen for your consideration.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioners, those applications in your packet, hopefully you've had time to review and consider those. Any comments pertaining to that? Commissioner Frohr, inasmuch as this is up in your neck of the woods, do you have any comments or recommendations, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Harvey. First off, I'd like to thank Chris Hogue and Representative Steve Waldrop for their service on the Ogden Valley Planning Commission. They've done a great job in representing the interest of Ogden Valley, and we hate to see them go, but we did have 7 applications,
Yes.
which is great because we started out, it looked like we were going to be a little shy of applications, but we had 7, in my opinion, very well qualified applications, Mr. Chair. Tough to make a decision on these because just about every case they were very well qualified, willing to serve, and I wish we could appoint all 7, but unfortunately we only have 2 openings. After some discussions with planning, I know that they've actually talked to these people, have done an interview and discussions with planning on their view of the applicants. I would make the motion as follows, that Mr. Trevor Schumann and Mr. Justin Torman be appointed to the Ogden Valley Planning Commission, Mr. Chair. That's my motion.
Trevor Schumann and Justin Torman are your recommendations?
Second.
And we have a second. Great. I'll place that motion for a roll call. Fatima?
Commissioner Frohr,
Aye.
Commissioner Jenkins,
Aye.
Chair Harvey.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
it might be mentioned here, there's a couple others that really I would like to see appointed to this too, but I have to agree with Commissioner Frohr. You just can't appoint them all. You have to make a choice, and anyway, we're trying to yield to him since he's in that area, and I do so respectfully because he yields to me in my area. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, not to say that the candidates that were not appointed couldn't serve in the future. In fact, I believe Mr. Schumann applied at our last opening and was not appointed. So, it's great to see the interest for public service. And I'd encourage all those who were not appointed to make sure that their applications stay involved or stay in the process. We have openings on these on occasions and look for qualified, interested people.
You know, the beauty about this commission today, commissioners, I feel, is that we're very well balanced. All 3 of our seats are at large. They're not zoned, yet we all live in different zones of the county.
Correct.
And so we're multi-generational, and so we have a lot of history, and it's been really, really good. So with those recommendations and with that vote, I think it's really strong, and we appreciate those who don't just get up and talk or just speak, but they actually do. And for those who would have interest in doing something more, there are always opportunities to serve or volunteer on different committees or councils here within Weber County, so we appreciate that very much, and thanks to all those who are willing to serve. Commissioners, item number 2 we're going to hold. We talked about this yesterday in our work session, and we decided to hold that.
Surprises me. I thought we had that worked out.
We decided to hold it because we wanted to hear the exact numbers on the difference.
That's right. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We'll move on then, Commissioners, to item number 3, which is a request for an amended contract by and between Weber County and Graphic House LLC for the engineering, fabrication, delivery, and installation of the Ogden Valley Wayfinding signage. Mr. Perks, glad to have you here on this one.
Thank you, Commissioners. So we just wanted to put this on the agenda. This isn't a minor amendment to this contract. There's no change in the amount or the scope of the contract. We simply had a few red lines we wanted to work in from legal recommendation that the vendor was happy to accommodate. So we've gone ahead and amended that. They've executed that and sent that over to us. Again, no substantial changes, just some red lines from our legal counsel to be a little bit more defensible if things were to go sour on this.
Very good. Commissioners, we've had a chance to review this one as well. Comments? Commissioner Jenkins, I'll go to you first. Anything on this one? Commissioner Frohr?
Nothing for me. Let me know when you're ready for a motion.
I'll take a motion in just a moment, just by way of explanation. Wayfinding is something that tells people who are not necessarily familiar with our area where certain things are. Many of you may have noticed them on this side of the mountains as it relates to where our amphitheater are, where the Perry's Egyptian Theater or the Union Station or the Golden Spike Event Center. There's one right outside this door here that talks about different things. These would be some wayfindings that start up in the Upper Valley. As tourists come, it'll help direct them. It'll be easier for them. It makes it more friendly, but it also will help so our congestion hopefully won't be as big there, and so just spells things out. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, with the question first for Mr. Perks, question did come up, so I know that we've been working with the Forest Service on this. Did we work out the issues that we had with them on colors, et cetera, on their property?
We did, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
we did get that resolved.
Thank you. I appreciate that work with the Forest Service. I know that was not an easy lift at times. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would move to approve the amended contract by and between Weber County and Graphic House LLC for the engineering, fabrication, delivery, and installation of the Ogden Valley Wayfinding Signage, Phase 1.
We have a motion and a second. I'll place that motion for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Now, Commissioners, we'll move on to item number 4. Mr. Myers, if you'd make your way up here, this is a request for approval of the standard operation and maintenance procedures for the Weber County Emergency Watershed Protection Project, the Little Weber Cutoff intake, the structure to be operated and maintained by Weber County. Gary Myers, our engineer, go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. For your
Good morning.
approval today, I have for you our operation and maintenance manual for the Little Weber. Construction on this probably began about 2014, roughly. It's been wrapped up and finalized, and this kind of gives us a guideline to help us operate this facility and minimize impacts as a result of operating it.
Questions, Commissioners? Commissioner Jenkins, this is kind of in your portfolio or wheelhouse. Anything you want to comment here, sir?
No, I don't think so. It's pretty much standard stuff. Does it say who has the right to decide the day that's opened?
So it's actually a function of a few different people, Commissioner. If you look on page 2, there's five different things that need to be satisfied before the gates are ultimately opened. But we coordinate with the emergency management director, with the landowners, as well as also we let folks know that might be receiving the water, such as it makes its way out towards the Great Salt Lake.
Once again, who is it that makes the decision?
So it's actually a combined decision between the emergency management director and myself, with cooperation with one of the commissioners, ultimately.
So
And
where does it say that in there?
so,
Point that out to me specifically.
okay. So in Part B, it says the emergency management director will have the responsibility to determine how and when the gates will be open. But then there's also a portion in there that, and I'm not seeing it right now, that talks about it will be in coordination with myself as well as with the commissioners on it as well. Let me see if it's on the first page.
You know, I stood there last time when this decision
That's
was
right.
made.
That's right.
And I just want to make sure that everybody is fully aware.
You know,
Because when I read through this, I didn't get a sense of what
no,
you're telling me.
and I was there with you that day. Very interesting conversation. But if I could point your attention to the second paragraph under D, where it actually identifies how much we will discharge into that channel. We actually will not even, this agreement says we won't even open the channel until the river hits 3,000 CFS.
Yeah.
And then it will be opened further once the gauge at the Plain City crossing registers 3,500 CFS. So that helps us kind of identify how much water will even be going into the channel in the event that it is actually opened.
All right.
So, and if you recall correctly, one of the concerns that was brought up that day you're referencing was, a couple things. Number one, there was no notice, which this agreement actually says we will give landowners 5 to 7 days ahead notice. And then secondly, the amount of water was brought up as a concern as to how much we were discharging into the channel at that point.
So when you say you'll give them 5 to 7 days notice,
Uh-huh.
when you have a rainstorm on a top of melting snow,
That's right.
we have 12 hours notice.
That's right. And you're, you're absolutely correct. Sometimes 5 to 7 days is sometimes not accommodated. You know, we can't
Yeah.
accommodate that request. However, during that time, during runoff, during spring water conditions, we're watching and monitoring that fairly closely on a daily basis. So it may not be 5 to 7 days.
Interesting. We've
but-
seen that last, several years ago when that happened.
That's right.
You're in the middle of the runoff and this, you get a rainstorm, and rainstorm doubles the runoff, and the dam, especially if the dam happens to be spilling, then there's no control upriver, none. And we're just, well, we got 12 hours.
We're at the mercy of the river at that
Yeah.
point, right?
And at that
Yeah.
point, we will have to make a call.
Yeah.
Is there provisions in there for us to make that call,
Let's see.
as you see it?
Yes. So under Part B, it also says before opening the gates, the Emergency Management Director will work with the County Commission and coordinate with downstream property owners as well, too. So it's,
You know, it's interesting for you guys in the audience listening to this. This is a engineer talking to a guy who's not an engineer, and he says, yeah, there's provisions in here. And as I read that, I don't see any provisions that says that. It says we should work with them. Well, what does that mean, work with them?
it's, yeah, no, it's, you know, there's a lot of factors at play when we actually open this gate. And
I know, I stood there last time we
yeah,
did it, and
it's not a
there's a lot of
decision made
people
by-
mad at us when we
That's right.
opened that gate.
That's right. That's right. You know, and it's not something we take lightly because it's their business. It's their livelihood at stake if we open this and they don't have proper warning.
Well, I do want the folks to know that we've worked diligently in the last 2 years to make sure the downstream people, they said that we created this diversion and then just dumped the water and really didn't do anything for the downstream people. Well, I don't know if that was true or not, but I'll tell you this much. The county has gone through now to the folks downstream, and we've cleaned their canals, we've given them head gates, we've built a relief, I would call it, where if the water gets so high and it's going to start affecting their property, it spills off to the north and runs out into another area. And so we've done a pretty good job out there of, I believe, I should say that, of satisfying all the property owners' needs. And I think it's time that we're ready for this.
Well,
So,
you say property owners' needs, and it's not just related to the property owners' needs out there. The people who are at top of the mountain, you know, they don't, once their water leaves their property and goes into the gutter and starts to spill, it's still got a long ways to travel before it gets out there. We've virtually taken the hair that's out of the bottom of the bathtub, and so the water can drain out of the tub. And so, you know, people don't worry about it when they're at the top of the tub, but if their house was the one that was flooding, they'd be a lot more concerned about it as opposed to those at the bottom. So, Commissioner Farrar, anything?
No, I agree with that. You know, obviously, unfortunately, this year, I don't think we'll have to address a flooding issue. But those years to come, I think we've got a good process in plan here. So
Great.
I support it.
Very good, thank you. Very good. So I'll entertain, if we were done with the discussion, I'll entertain a motion on item number 4.
I am ready, Mr. Chair. I'd make a
Please.
motion that we approve item G4, which is a standard operation and maintenance procedures for the, what we call Little Weber Cutoff on the lower Weber River.
We have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. I'll place that motion for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thanks,
Myers.
Gary.
Appreciate that. Ms. Jensen, this is a request, Commissioners, this is a request for approval of a contract by and between Weber County and Express Solutions, Inc. for online bill pay services. We spoke regarding the Treasurer's Office earlier. Ms. Jensen, glad to have you here.
Thank you.
For your part in this. Go ahead with your presentation, please.
So, kind of to address your opinion this morning about doing business in a new way, this is all part of that. We need a new online payment system for our sewer customers. There's about 300 sewer customers and, you know, that are in the unincorporated area, and they need to have the ability to be able to to log in and look at their account online, to be able to make payments, whether they do a one-time payment or set up recurring payments to happen every month, and to also receive emails. And so Scott Park and I have gone through and vetted different companies and looked at, you know, how their services would fill these needs. And we basically came to the conclusion that this express bill pay fit our needs the best. And we kind of based that upon their cost. We felt like their cost was fair and reasonable. We felt like that they filled all the things that we needed. It wasn't more than we needed, and yet it was everything we could foresee needing as well. And then also it was something that we could see growing into, that if other departments needed these services down the road, that we could expand what we've started with this company and expand it into other departments as well. And also we like the fact that they were based from Utah. They're a Utah-based business. They service hundreds of businesses and entities, and some here in Weber County and Davis County, and we've talked to some and found that they're all very happy with the services provided. So we felt like this was our best option for a bill pay and something that will give access to every customer 24/7 instead of only when we're here 9 to 5 or 8 to 5. So that's it.
Commissioners, great chance to comment on this. Commissioner Farrar.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's great to see the county step up and take advantage of the online services. That's where our world is right now. I remember, Mr. Chair, in the property management business years ago where people would bring in checks once a month and either hand deliver them, sometimes they put them in the mail. They'd even come in for a list of properties that may be available for rent. We don't even see that today. Everything's done online, which is easy for them, easy for us, and it's great. And that's where industry is going. That's just one example of where we should be as county government, which is really customer service. So
it is, and the public has required us to be more efficient and streamline our processes so that we can keep our costs down.
Exactly right.
That's how we keep taxes from going up. And Scott Park, you spoke to taxes. We don't foresee a tax increase for the next 5 years on our general fund based on how we're managing it. So that affirms through our comptroller that we're doing things reasonably. And I'll also comment on our internal audits, that they've all been good and sound. And so I think it's being managed very well. Commissioner Jenkins, anything you'd like to comment on this, or
I
motion?
do. I have some questions. Mrs. Jensen, this is expandable, you said?
Mm-hmm. Well, just that we could bring in other departments and use the same services.
Well, the reason I question that is when we did garbage, we didn't have this ability at the time, and so we elected to go another direction. And this turned out okay. There's nothing wrong with what we've done. But if the day ever came that we had to bring that back in-house, we'd have the ability to do it now. That's good. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Well, with that in mind, Mr. Chair, I'd make the motion that we approve item G5, which is the contract between Weber County and Express Solutions.
We have a motion?
Second.
And a second. Great. There's no other questions. I'll place that motion for vote. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. That's approved. Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Appreciate that very much. Page 3. Item number H on our agenda today is our public hearing. This is I'm looking for a request for a motion to adjourn the public meeting and convene a public hearing.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. We're now in a public hearing. Great. Now this public hearing, for those of you online who may want to comment or in person, is intended to hear the items listed under item number H. It's specific to those items listed under H. Are those things to discuss planning and zoning only at this time? So the first one, Commissioners, is item number 2, which is a public hearing to consider and take action on a request to amend the Weber County zone map to rezone approximately 5 acres from the CVR1 and CV2 zones to an FR3 zone at approximately 947 East, Highway 39. Our presenter, Charlie Ewert. Go ahead, Mr. Ewert.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Charlie, do you have anything that you're going to put on the screen for us today on this?
I do. In fact, I've started sharing the screen on Zoom.
Very good.
Just need to switch over. There we go.
So as you can see here in this image, we've got two properties here along Highway 39 at the intersection of Old Snow Basin Road. The applicant's property is this property here. It's about a little over 3 acres, and there's an adjacent parcel next door which is owned by the Snow Basin company. We have spoken with the Snow Basin entity. We figure if we do a rezone on this particular property here, it would be most consistent in zoning in the area if we also provided the same on the adjacent parcel. We spoke with the owners, and the owners were fine with that proposed modification. Okay. The existing zoning in the property, as you can see, is CVR1. It's the same zone as the property across the street. Under that zone, there's quite a bit of uses that can be allowed. Hotels, you can have condos, you can have condotels, resorts, recreational lodges, among other things. CVR stands for Commercial Valley Recreation Resort. It's one of 2 resort zones in the Ogden Valley planning area. And that's currently the zone. So anything that's allowed in this zone would be entitled for the applicant to ask for. The applicant is asking for a change of that zone to the FR3 zone. FR3 stands for Forest Residential, and the 3 stands for the heaviest intensity of our forest residential zones. Forest residential is intended to be essentially a sister zone to the CVR1 zone. It's intended to be in proximity to resort areas to provide housing for those resort areas. As we look at the different things that can happen in the FR3 zone from the CVR1 zone, primarily you'll see that the FR3 zone is more residential in nature, but there's quite a bit that can happen that's the same. In fact, the site development standards are very similar to each other. In the CVR1 zone, you need a minimum of 7,500 square feet per site, and then every dwelling unit you add over 2 dwelling units requires another 2,000 square feet. So in other words, you need at least 7,500 square feet for your first 2 dwelling units, and then for each additional apartment or house or whatever you add on, you need an additional 2,000 square feet of acreage. That's about the same calculation in the FR3 zone. Across the board, you could get potentially 20 dwelling units per acre in both the zones. So moving from the CVR1 zone to the FR3 zone in terms of density, dwelling unit density, there's not a whole lot different. Speaking with the applicant, who is in the room today and may want to have share a few words with you, they mentioned that they're only able to get enough sewer connections for 13. And so the CVR1 zone may not be something that they would want to pursue primarily because of sewer connection issues. The other thing to mention is that the proposal that they have provided, the county, it can be done under the current zone now. It could be done as 13 recreational lodges. It could be done as 1 or 2 recreational lodges with another 11 residential homes. The layout of the proposal isn't likely to change whether it be under the CVR1 zone or the FR3 zone. It's the layout that the applicant desires and is likely to be the final layout. It is worth noting that the subdivision of the land, not the use of the land, but the subdivision of the land, is scheduled for preliminary subdivision review on the Planning Commission's meeting tonight. Whether or not the rezone is passed, the applicant plans to move forward with subdividing the land the way that they've proposed. Let me show you the layout that the Planning Commission saw. Now, the applicant has proposed a different layout than this, slightly different. As you look over in here, they've taken away the circle and they've provided a hammerhead turnaround. What that allows them to do is kind of bring these lots away from Highway 39 in this direction and tighten things up a little bit. Some of the primary concerns that I've heard expressed from the community, number one is density, and this is about double the density as what the nearest cul-de-sac subdivision with a cul-de-sac is, which is the cul-de-sac right next door. And so this is, about double the density of that particular cul-de-sac, and quite a bit more density than you'll see going up the hill up Old Snow Basin Road. And again, the current zone, I just want to make sure I reiterate, the current zone allows that density, if not more, if there was more sewer capacity. Okay, so
So Charlie, you're telling us right now the mitigating factor that prevents this from being higher density is not the zoning, it's the sewer.
yes.
Okay, that's good to understand.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yep. And again, that's in both zones. So even if you didn't do a rezone, there still would be the same. If you didn't do a rezone from the CVR1 to the FR3 zone, the applicant would be required to do a certain amount of commercial in the project. But like I mentioned, a couple of those houses could be lodges. There really isn't anything significant in terms of the use that is different between the two. If you were to look in our definition of single-family dwelling versus a recreation lodge, the differences between the two isn't going to spell out any operational standards of how that building exists. It will spell out in the building code to what standard it would need to be built. So if it's a lodge, it's going to have to be built to the IBC, International Building Code. If it's a house, it could be the IRC, International Residential Code. A little bit more relaxed standards for single-family dwellings. In speaking with the applicant, they've mentioned that they would like to keep the site looking as residential as possible. They want this to be a residential subdivision and sell as residential lots. The big sticking point seems to be in the community is that the FR3 zone allows short-term rentals. And we've had a lot of discussions about short-term rentals over the last year or so. It is important to note that both CVR1 zone, the current zone, and the applicant's requested zone, FR3 zone, they both allow short-term rentals. When reviewing a piece of property under the CVR1 zone as a commercial use, there's going to be site development standards, there's going to be design review requirements, all kinds of details that will be required. Under residential zone, a lot of those details aren't going to be requested because we don't request a lot of those when it comes to residences. In working with the applicant and in developing short-term rental ordinance over the last year or so, we believe that there is a way that we can apply some rules to this particular project. Even though our short-term rental ordinance has not been adopted, we do think that there are rules in that proposal that could be could work really well in this development. In fact, talking to the applicant and some of the neighbors, this might be a really good pilot program for some of those standards. So when you look at some of the different concerns that the neighbors had with short-term rentals, primary concern is going to be parking. And I think when we talked about this last week at our work session with you guys, I think you guys echoed the same concern. Working with the applicant, I've mentioned that he needs to design the interior. It's all going to be private road accesses, private driveways, so no public access to it. And so there's not a whole lot on the interior of this development that we're going to have a lot of oversight over. However, if the inside of it isn't configured correctly, people with boats, people with big vehicles, RVs, they're going to be more likely to park out on the street, Highway 39 and Old Snow Basin Road. The applicant is sensitive to that concern, and we've worked with the applicant to agree that each one of these lots will have 8 parking spaces. And at least one of those parking spaces is going to be tandem, so you'll have the ability to pull a boat or a trailer or an RV onto the parcel instead of leaving it in the road or parking it out on the street or diverting parking into the neighboring residential neighborhoods. We just don't want to see that happen. The applicant has shown us the essential designs of these buildings. There are 8 sleeping rooms, so 8 bedrooms in each of these buildings, and that's where the number 8 comes from. 1 parking space, at least 1 parking space per bedroom. Okay. There are other parking spaces that the applicant has proposed in their conceptual design as well. The other big concern with short-term rentals is operations and management. How do you operate and manage a short-term rental complex when you've got 13 different owners? Well, the applicant is okay with our proposed short-term rental ordinance that requires single management or single operations and management. And so the applicant would essentially form an HOA. That HOA would contract a management company, and the standard would be that someone will be on site within 1 hour of a call. And so if there's a loud party, if there's something, parking issues, if there's a concern that anyone has, not only would we have county code enforcement, but the management entity of this HOA would need to be on site within that amount of time. The proposed language of the short-term rental ordinance also has penalties for noncompliance. It's got lighter penalties for violation of some of the less impactful rules, and it's got heavier penalties for violation of some of the heavier rules. For example, if a management agency can't be on site within 60 minutes, and it's documented that they're not there within 60 minutes, that would be a ding to one of the softer regulatory standards. So there would be a penalty that would be applied. It would be a financial penalty. After a certain amount of those dings, the short-term rental license would be revoked, and you wouldn't be able to get it back. And so the owner and the HOA and all of the individual owners who will own the property later has huge motivation to make sure that their tenants maintain compliance with the rules and that their management company maintains compliance with the rules. Otherwise, the right to rent would be revoked. Okay, so some pretty strict requirements. Looking over some of the standards that we looked at. So number one, let's talk about what the Ogden Valley Planning Commission recommended. Ogden Valley Planning Commission recommended approval of the rezone, but they didn't want to see short-term rentals. They just didn't feel like with the layout that I just showed you that there was enough parking. I think was what I heard was the primary concern, was parking. The layout that the applicant now has, which isn't in your packet but would be part of a development agreement, it provides adequate parking for the type of use.
You say it does?
It does, yes. Yeah, like I said, 8.
And how does it do that?
So 8 parking spaces per lot, plus there's a small, I can't remember exactly how many stalls. There's like 10 stalls.
Because the layout we have here doesn't show that.
Right, and I could pull up, let me see if I could pull up the new layout. Let me review with you what the Planning Commission mentioned. I'll pull up that layout as I'm doing so. So they mentioned no short-term rentals, and they wanted to see a contract with the county saying, this rezone comes with the stipulation that none of these, basically that none of the landowners can apply for a short-term rental operation. The applicant would really like to see short-term rentals be allowed, and the applicant has so far been willing to comply with some of the more strict regulations that we've been contemplating in a short-term rental ordinance. Okay, so number one, this is with, this is staff recommendation if the county commission would like to enable short-term rentals to occur. So that there be an authorized agent, operational standards, and enforcement provisions and penalties that are found in the recently drafted but not adopted short-term rental ordinance. And you can see what those requirements are at the bottom in attachment C. The agreement should require that the entire development be managed under single management. I mentioned that. The agreement should have a conceptual layout in the development agreement to guide development thereon. I'll show you what the most recent layout is. It's probably not going to be the final layout. There are some tweaks that are going to need to happen in order to get that final layout done. The agreement should have landscape plan that illustrates berming of adjacent residential uses and proposed vegetation and watering methods. So the applicant, in working with the neighboring HOA, has suggested that maybe they can try and hide this, or at least tuck it away from those adjacent homes as much as possible. So providing hills with on the perimeter with vegetation on top of that is what they're essentially proposing. The agreement should provide for the authorization and governance of an alternative access for the proposed private shared drive. So in a little bit later on your agenda, there is a private street ordinance that you'll contemplate and consider. This particular road that would go into this complex wouldn't even be a private street. It would essentially be a shared private lane. It's smaller than the standard. It's about 20 feet wide. It's enough for a fire truck to get in and get out. It's only 13 homes that would be located on it, and it's a terminal street. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense for the county to want to operate and maintain that, where it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't provide a public good for the greater public. And the applicant could actually bring homes a little bit away from some of the property lines in order to create those berms if that street is narrower. Also, a narrower street will discourage parking along the streetway and encourage it where we have designated it on the properties. And then there is an opportunity here for the agreement with the county to authorize essentially the short-term rental as a conditional use permit. We have done this in another development agreement recently, where we essentially, through the development agreement, said this stands as your conditional use permit also. It relieves the applicant from having to go through another iterative process and address all the same things that we're trying to address here with this rezone. And so I've got 3 options laid out for you. I'll pull up on that the new site plan here. I just wanted to make sure I rounded up that conversation with the different options. So option 1 would be to go with what the Planning Commission has recommended. Have an agreement that says no short-term rentals. You can go option 2 if you're okay with the way that the applicant has proposed it. And that's got 6 different findings. Again, that list, it's just a start if you'd like to see more. And then option 3, if the county commissioners, if you would like to deny it, that's also an option. Just deny it with reasonable findings. Okay. Let me pull open, and forgive me as I do this, their concept plan. Commissioners, I'm thinking maybe as I'm pulling this open, I've got to grab it online. Is there a conversation or dialogue we can have, or did you want to go into public hearing with each individual item, or did you want to do that in one block at the end of each item?
You have a preference, Commissioner?
No preference. Your meeting. You run it how you want.
Let's hear it in a block.
Okay.
Would be good.
Well,
Thank you.
If I could stall for a minute and invite the applicant to come up.
That's
and
what I was
address
thinking,
it.
actually, while
Perfect.
you're looking for that. If the applicant's here, if you'd come forward, and he is, please, if you'd state your name and your city, please, and then address the commission.
Todd Myers with CW Land, Centerville, Utah. Thank you, commissioners, for consideration of our application. And I'd also like to thank your planning staff. They are very thorough, very professional, and they have definitely made their time available to us as we've had questions. And probably the biggest question came from the work session of last week. There was definitely a strong communication to us that we needed to take a good look at parking. And so we met with the planning staff on Thursday to see how we could do the parking. And as Charlie gets that up, what we've done is there'll be a 2-car garage, so you'll have 2 stalls there. The driveway will be 25 feet, so you'll have 2 more stalls there. And then along the side of the house, you would have, from the driveway going through the side of the house, another 3 stalls. There's 11 stalls that are in kind of a common area parking. But also with the change of the design of getting rid of the cul-de-sac and doing the hammerhead design, each of those street ends now creates a spot for snow storage that will use a all-weather material such as asphalt, so that during the summer months that would be additional parking for roughly another 8 stalls for the overall. And so I think we've met the needs of what we would need for this. We definitely understand we do not want anybody parking out on the public street. Support, having the plat have the condition that we would need to put no parking signs going up and down the street, so it does not interfere with the neighbors and the enjoyment of their neighborhood. As we've looked at this project, we've taken two approaches. The one would be, okay, if the rezone is not approved, and so if we go with the existing zone, it affects the building codes on a couple of the units. It's very reasonable. We could definitely go that route. Our preference, though, is the application that we have before you to rezone it. And with that, we are willing to enter into a development agreement that takes the things from the short-term rental, the draft proposal of that, and put it into the development agreement as a requirement for this property, including we would also want to have at that time approved the overnight rentals as part of that development agreement.
Very good, Mr. Myers. Thank you. Commissioner, any questions for Mr. Myers?
Well, I do. So you're willing to accept this agreement the way the Planning Commission has presented it to us, with no short-term rental?
No.
Yeah, okay. So you don't want us to approve this today?
If it's not approved, we'll move ahead with the existing zone and just follow the building code for that.
Yeah, but if we do approve it, they're suggesting we approve it without the use of short-term rentals, and you don't want that.
No.
But
what it really gets more to the staff report, option number 2, that it would be approved with a development agreement, that it would address the adverse effects of the short-term rentals.
And that's what you'd prefer?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
yes, meaning the adverse effect which would address the parking stalls, having a management company that would respond within 60 minutes, and then a fee or a fine that would be levied against those who were not in compliance.
Which I believe that is part of that.
The only other things, too, is limit the number of bedrooms was the other part of the report that I read on that. And you're at 8 bedrooms on each unit, correct?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Charlie, you found what you needed?
Commissioners, I'm having some technological issues. Todd's going to email that over to me right now, see if we can get that up on the screen for you. While we're looking on the screen, sorry, can we switch over? There we go. I did want to show you what their design is. So when we do a development agreement, there's a number of ways we can do it. We could be very specific. We could be pretty general. Now, the specificity, it comes with pros and cons. You go very specific, any kind of change that comes in the future, whether it be the county change or the developer making a change, would have to go through a renegotiation process. Usually not too complicated, but it can be unnecessarily. The designs that you see here are the designs that CW Urban are proposing, and let me just kind of scroll through here. I believe they are in your staff report. But they give you kind of an example of the visual aesthetics of the buildings. They do match essentially an architectural motif that we do find emerging in the Ogden Valley. You've got floor plans, excuse me, here, and these do show 8 bedrooms in each of these units, and the units will be fairly uniform. They do show 3-car garages. For most, I think a couple of them have 2-car garage, but most of them have 3. Sorry, I got a couple of different people trying to get that graphic sent over to me right now. Okay. And then, get down to the end. There was some concern that emerged early on from the neighbors that the applicant was going to try and do lockouts. A lockout is essentially you just got a room that's kind of self-sustaining, has the ability to be locked off from the rest of the unit and be rented separate. Both our short-term rental ordinance proposal, as well as the applicant, has suggested that lockouts wouldn't be allowed. Our short-term rental ordinance basically says if you're going to rent the whole house out, it's got to be rented out to one party, essentially, not to multiple different parties, or not subletted out at the same time. Okay. And a moment of truth. Forgive me. Let's see.
Boy, Charlie, only 39 emails. That'd be nice.
I checked them all just before coming. That's 39 since 10 o'clock.
Okay, I'll give you a little break.
Well, since 9 o'clock, I guess. Let's see. Sorry, it looks like that's not the correct one. I apologize, a little bit disorganized. Technology's not working my way, but essentially... Oh, perfect. Perfect. What you'll see as I'm pulling this up is that, as Mr. Myers mentioned, there are, they've taken the cul-de-sac out. They've got 2 hammerheads that have been in place. And by the way, where I'm leading you to on the screen, if it's still on the screen, is the county's project tracking software. Anybody can log into this. You got to create an account that has your email address and a password. So in removing the circle and removing the removing the circle and replacing it with a hammerhead, they were able to free up a little bit of space between the buildings. This is not easy to do. Well, I have one person looking over my shoulder, let alone a county. Forgive me. So this project has 2 different files on this website. It's got the Basin Subdivision, which is the one that's going to go to the Planning Commission tonight for preliminary approval if the Planning Commission approves it. And then there's the Basin rezone. So the rezone is what we're talking about tonight, but I'm in the subdivision file here. And this gives you the revised landscape plan. Oh, there we go. I was going to say the blank screen is the same thing that was happening before, but let's see if we can get this pulled up.
It's not, it's, there you go. I was going to say, give it a little minute. It's
Technology, it likes to work when you don't need it, and the other way around when you do. Okay, so you can see how they come in, and instead of having a big cul-de-sac, with all that asphalt.
yeah, the hammerhead that was on the previous slide. Or on the slide that, I think it's just catching up, Charlie. I think we're going a little too quick.
It is.
I could be wrong, though.
No, you're absolutely right. It's lagging a little bit. Here we go. So one of the concerns that the Planning Commission brought up were the homes that are along Highway 39 were just a little too close to Highway 39 for comfort. None of the homes along Highway 39 are that close. And getting rid of that big cul-de-sac right here, they were able to pull those homes away from 39, put in a bit of a detention basin, stormwater basin, and the rear of the property. They're able to kind of spread the homes out just a little bit more. And if you look between the homes, they are proposing space between the homes that you would be able to fit a RV or 2 trailers on there. Now, this current proposal is just the preliminary proposal, so it doesn't have the exact distance between the homes. But in the discussions that we were having with Mr. Myers and their engineer, CW's engineer, they were talking about 12 per pad, 12 feet per pad.
He just said 11, Charlie.
Oh, excuse me, 11 per pad. And that would get you, most trailers and RVs fit between those.
What's
two
the
buildings.
side offset, for instance, between 9 and 10 and between, between 8 and 7? What are the side offsets there?
The required or what's actually going to be there?
I'll ask required, that's right now.
Okay, so the FR3 zone requires minimum of 8. The combination between the two sides needs to be 18, so if you do 8 on one side, you need to have 10 on the other. And we have the ability, if it's in the best interest of the project and the public, to modify those setbacks as well through this development agreement. What we would do is we would apply the new MPD overlay zone that was just adopted to the project and allow some of these to be reduced. For example, here we're showing over here you got a 20-foot setback because it's a corner lot. We have the ability on these private streets, in this private development where it's not a thoroughfare, we could reduce those to 10 feet and spread those homes out a little bit more to provide for that parking. So the engineering's still out on that, but it is possible to do given the site characteristics and conditions, and we would expect that. So that they can provide that tandem parking space for a trailer or an RV development. Any questions about that?
I've got just a comment, but Mr. Meyer, with all due respect, and I appreciated your presentation, your willingness to work here, about the only thing you're going to fit with an 8-foot side offset's a canoe. You're not going to have any room to, and I've backed trailers since I was a boy. It's most of those trailers are full 8 foot, 8.5 feet wide, and that's pretty tough backing, especially around a house like that, with only a 20-foot wide street. You're threading a needle there, and we're worried about a boat. How many of them are going to have a boat? But even opening a car into the neighbor's property or into a building, I have a slight concern with regards to side offset because of what your intended plan was there. Also, I've been pushing snow for a lot of years. Luckily, lately it's with a power shovel instead of with a hand shovel, but it's tough to throw snow that whole way. And when you're putting driveway against side driveway, that becomes really difficult for your management company. Watching if there were a cost, if you had a landscaper, that's going to blow that clear back. That's a big throw.
Yep.
You know, have to throw it 50, 60 feet. That's going to require big equipment to get it that far. Just a thought, and so just some thoughts for you there. Those are my comments on that.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, and to clarify, they wouldn't do 8 foot. Minimum would be 8 foot. I think we would want to require more through the development agreement in order to provide that parking.
I'd written that down as a note. Thank
Perfect.
you, Mr. Reaver.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments?
Well, actually, your comments, and Tina and I will.
Can you
answer your
please, if those of you who are on the, please mute. This would be Dan Hoover. Will you please mute please mute Dan Hoover.
To be with us and guide us.
Shelley, can you mute, please?
Allow us to guide you.
Sorry
And
for the interruption.
we're all here. We're all gaining something. We're all learning something to really trust that.
I'm sorry. Thank you. If you'll mute everyone online until they're invited to speak, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Jenkins, any questions for Mr. Ewert?
Well, I actually am excited to see a place to put snow up there. Because, you know, we've got subdivisions out there that don't have places to put snow right now, and it makes it pretty tough to, you can blow some of this, even if you have to blow it 30 or 40 feet. It can be done. That drawing you just showed the road width at 24 feet.
Mm-hmm.
What does it show the asphalt? Because
Actually, on the phone call, just call in. You good with that? And then shoot me an email if there's anything you think we need to jump in and say. But
a text or an email?
Yeah, just an email. If you're watching, I'll keep my email open.
Sorry, folks. We may remove the opportunity to speak if that continues, Shelley. Okay?
anyway,
Sorry.
is the asphalt width 24 feet?
Their proposal is for the right-of-way width to be 24
Yeah.
feet. Now, the asphalt width can be as low as 20 feet with an alternative access.
Well, okay. You know, my only concern here, we're putting a lot of density in here, and I'm not down on density, but, you know, it's like we need a little ability to get around in it. And a 20-foot road, it's actually doable, there's not a problem there, but that is narrow. And, well, anyway, that's about it. That's good enough.
Okay.
I've said what I need.
Great. Anything else on this presentation, Mr. Ewert?
No, not from me.
Great. We'll have some time for public comment. Commissioner, anything on, before we move on to the next?
So, Charlie, you've given us 3 recommendations.
Mhm.
What has the Planning Commission given us?
So the Planning Commission's recommendation is the first one,
Yeah.
which is approve the rezone, don't allow nightly rentals.
So how can they approve a rezone and then take part of the zone that they're entering away? That makes no sense to me, because we've created a zone and the purposes in the zone, and I don't see where they've got the right, the ability. I don't see how they can just take it away. I mean, that's not an option where I see it. So it's like, well, that's like saying we want to rezone to a commercial zone so they can build a store, but I don't want any stores in there. You can have the commercial zone, but no store. And it's like, no, that's not the way it works. You give them the commercial zone, then they can do what they want inside the zone.
Right.
And so I don't understand how, and you know, I was a commissioner, so I understand their feelings, but I just don't understand how they can do this. It's not an option, as I see it, to give somebody a commercial zone and then take part of the commercial zone away. That's not the option. Is either you give them the zone or you don't. Now, am I wrong?
It's a policy question on this one. If you were asking legally, can it be done? I think it could be, and I'll let Mr. Crockett correct me if I'm wrong. I do think it could be done. The additional restrictions that we would apply through a development agreement is an example of restrictions that wouldn't be applied to other entities in the same zone. It would only be applied to this entity through that agreement. And so where they're asking for essentially a law change, the law to be changed from CVR1 to FR3, that can come with an agreement and equitable consideration on behalf of the county from the applicant to the county and the county to the applicant. Applicant to county would be giving them a new zone, excluding one of those uses. Now,
I understand all that, but what ends up happening here is this becomes so complicated, nobody can understand it. And then later on, somebody wants to sell one of these units, and it just ends up being a menagerie here.
Yep. That's one of the challenges I think we would need to overcome.
That's right. So that's one of the reasons I say, look, if either they get the zone or they don't get the zone.
Yeah.
And if the Planning Commission has approved this in this zone, then I think we ought to give them everything the zone allows. And if they don't get the zone, then they ought to turn it down, and the individual who owns the property understands why it got turned down and what he needs to do to make it comply with the zone he's in.
That's right.
You know, it's just that simple.
And it makes it cleaner, easier to administer.
Right. Well, anyway, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but that's my feelings on this.
No, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. So, you know, on this particular one, if we go the way it is now, I like the idea. First off, you and I have been driving up there for 40-plus years. You know, making that.
I'm a little older than you.
Okay, you.
50 for me.
I was going to say you. Okay, that's plus. That's okay. That was going to be a commercial zone for a long time, or it's been a commercial zone for a long time. It was rezoned to its current zone back in 2007, if I remember the history correctly on it, or on the notes. It was always going to be a hotel, but you're saying now that there's not the capacity in the existing sewer infrastructure to handle something with more density than what's been proposed. One of the things a hotel does do is provides management. we're basically creating a hotel in 13 different buildings. And so management of that type of a philosophical is important to me, but I like the idea of for me, you know, I came into this thinking, just leave it as it is, but I like the idea of having some management oversight, and since the developer has openly said, I'm okay with management oversight, I believe one of the options available to us today, Commissioner, is the staff recommendation that it says there are some provisions with this new zone, and I respect very much with what you say. I was, on the first presentation, I had a lot of problem. Well, how can we allow this over here when we're doing the same zoning over here, and yet that's not right to me. That's a problem for me. But we've got now a willing applicant who I think in good faith, my big thing goes back to parking. And making sure people do not park in that 20 feet or out on the road. You've kept the architecture of them looks great to me, looks fine. And I think with regards to regulating the short-term rentals and management, since you've agreed to that, and enough parking around there, my only other issue, the on-site management's an issue, but my only other issue right now is the side offset, as what was shown. But also, as you mentioned, Commissioner, would be the front offset to make sure that the front of the garage door is at least 24 feet off the road, because those of us who drive trucks know that you need at least 24 feet. You know, if you drive any kind of a truck, you're going to need probably 24 feet. I don't mean to disparage trucks that aren't 24 feet. Those trucks don't usually pull anything. So
I'm not offended. I don't have a truck, so it's all right.
That's okay. So, and also maybe some sort of an apron on that third drive. I wouldn't be opposed to 3-car wide coming out there, which gave you the 8, but I don't know what that does to your design, coming all the way up the side on the thing. But that's it. We've decided, and if it's okay with you, again, Commissioner, we'll have the hearing all at once, and so we can hear the comments all together. So if there's nothing else on that, let's move on. Charlie, I'd like you to now move to item 3 on item H3. Item H3, which is a public hearing to discuss and take comment and potentially take action on an applicant initial proposal to amend the M3 zone to add shooting range and training course as an allowed use. Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you. So in looking through our zoning ordinances, we've got the allowance for shotgun shooting ranges, skeet shooting, in a couple of different zones, but we don't have any allowances for rifle shooting. Now, the county built a shooting range over in the manufacturing area on Rule and White Boulevard, but we did that through public facilities provisions in the ordinance of the M1 zone. So I'm a little surprised that we don't have the allowance of shooting ranges in any zone. And so, at least long rifle shooting ranges or pistol shooting ranges. So the applicant is asking for it to go into the, be allowed in the M3 zone. I would think we may want to look at other zones as well, but the applicant is only asking for M3, and I think it's easiest to start with the least restrictive of the zones, and then maybe work our way from there in other ordinances.
Is the applicant here today?
I don't see him.
Okay.
No. So the applicant has property in the M3 zone. We know the M3 zone is way out west of 8300 west. There's quite a bit of acreage out there that is M3, and the primary purpose of the M3 zone are things like the manufacturing of rocket parts. And so it's a pretty heavy intensity zone. And we say the least restrictive of the zones because it allows the most amount of things to happen. A lot of these allowances are allowed by conditional use permit, and so we can look at safety metrics, or we could look at neighboring landowner concerns in terms of objective findings, and apply additional conditions when a conditional use permit comes in. And so we are recommending the same, that a shooting range be allowed in the M3 zone as a conditional use permit. We're also recommending that things be applied to the use just as a standard. The standard being essentially, forgive me here, get you, there we go. Standard being primarily that there would be a containment system for errant bullets. So you can see these are eyebrow baffles. There are other ways to do baffles, overhead baffles, where you're not completely covering or enclosing the range. But essentially where you are sitting as the shooter or standing as a shooter, the only thing you can see downrange, go to another view, this is the shooter position with the baffle right overhead. As you look downrange, the only thing you can see is either the baffles, the target area, or the berms on the sides, or the berms at the back. That will contain errant bullets. The baffles, the ground, and the berms should be made of a material that can't create ricochet. That way, we have a pretty sure guarantee that all of the bullets will stay.
You said can't create ricochet. That's, I think you mean to say, if a ricochet happens, that it's controlled and it goes into the surface.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, because some of those baffles can actually be a hard surface metal that will then, that are angled in a way where the bullet will then ricochet down into the back berm or the ground. Yep, so that's exactly right. Thank you for the...
I just want to be clear.
I appreciate that.
I don't want to be obstructive in something like this, but I'd also want to be safe.
Yeah.
And errant bullets, I love being able to shoot, but I don't like errant bullets.
Yeah, it's the scariest part for sure. Some of the other concerns about this use is environmental. When you have a shooting range that's been in existence for years, you've got a lot of heavy metals that are dropped into the ground there. All of these, that particular kind of concern can be addressed with proper drainage, proper cleanup, site cleanup on a regular basis. And so I think all of the detrimental effects of a shooting range, especially out in the M3 zone, can be addressed. When we discussed this with the Planning Commission, excuse me, this is essentially what we saw as the potential new language underlined here. So shooting range or training course, indoor or outdoor, the facility shall provide designated shooting positions for which ballistic backstops are designed. No shooting is allowed except in these designated shooting positions. All sides downrange of the shooting position shall have a non-ricochet ballistic backstop, including overhead and on the ground or floor, capable of containing all errant bullets. For an outdoor range, the overhead backstop may be a series of baffles. Approval shall be subject to the requirements and conditions of the local fire authority. Planning Commission asked us to add another line onto there, which is that the operator of the shooting range be there while shooting is taking place.
Or a representative.
That's right. That's right. And that actually, the rewording that I put in there was employee.
So, am I missing the word? I don't see baffle anywhere on that. Oh.
Overhead. So just ballistic backstop. I said including overhead and on the ground.
Okay.
Doing a little bit of research on this, I mean, I found that you can put a shooting range in your house if you design the walls and the baffles.
I have a couple of friends who have them in their basements of their businesses.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the other thing to think about as you're looking at this and why it's so many pages when you're considering just that text right there is that one thing that we are recommending just as a part of cleanup, all right, let me get back up here, is to take all of the manufacturing zones, just like we did with the commercial zones and more recently the agricultural zones, and take them out of their individual chapters and combine them into one.
Mm.
So our intention isn't to change how these zones are applied, just make it easier to use and read. So, and here is the use table and what that could look like.
Commissioner Jenkins, this is squarely in your portfolio as it relates to what's going on here. Kind of bleeds over, but what comments do you have here on this one?
Well, I find myself highly conflicted here because I'm a private property rights person, and I believe if you want to go out and shoot your backyard into the ground, go ahead. But to create a commercial rifle range out west, this really doesn't go along with what we're planning out west. You know, we have other plans in that area, and we're actively working it, and it's developing, and things are happening out there right now. There's other ranges available in the county. You know, they can go up the Upper Valley and shoot at that one. They go to the commercial one out here and shoot.
Yeah,
On Little White. Yeah, I struggle with this a lot. What was the recommendation of the Planning Commission?
It was for approval. Yeah, approval with the addition of operator or appointee being on site.
Any other, this is just time to bake on it, and then we'll go take action a bit later or not.
So what are you thinking?
You know, I'm a private property right guy. My big thing is you know, if a guy wants to take his commercial property, and we know where that's headed out there and what the value that's going to be, welcome back. I think it'd be great to have things. Commissioner Frohr had business outside the county, and you've been just kind of almost like a ninja, out and back, and I appreciate that very much.
Glad to do it.
Anyway, so Commissioner, to bring you up to date, we are on item H3, which is the public hearing to discuss and take comments on the M3 zone to add shooting ranges.
Right. Thank you.
And so, anyway, errant bullets bother me. Guys that they're unfortunately, there's some guys that have done that their whole life. There's still some that get away, you know, and so I like the idea of a little more. I've seen what we've done out at our shooting range. I'm very comfortable. We're 100% containment out there. And so I'd like, when you do this in a controlled environment, I think it's safer and it prevents accidents. And there's a couple of families we could go to that accidents have been catastrophic for them. So I'm mindful of that. That hasn't ever left my mind. So I can support the Planning Commission on this one with what you've said there. That's what I'm thinking. Commissioner Frohr, do you have any comments on this?
Well, I have been involved with a couple discussions on this, and to me this is common sense. You know, let's put it in that zone. Let's have better control. Regulate in that M3 zone, which does make sense.
Okay.
So in that M3 zone out there, we're going to have new people out there building buildings and doing all this, and you're okay with them shooting in that area?
Well, I'm assuming there'll be some type of agreement in terms of what the structure would look like, et cetera, correct?
So the proposal from the applicant was that it'll be an outdoor range, but there will need to be berms that go around it, and we did talk about a bullet containment system.
Okay. Well, I think the devil's in the details on that, Commissioner, in terms of the safety.
Great. Any other comments on this before we move to the next item? We'll have a chance to talk again. Let's move on to item number 4, which is a public hearing to discuss, take comment, and potentially take action on a county-initiated proposal to amend the subdivision ordinance to better address culinary and secondary water provisions. Charlie Ebert.
Thank you. So, Commissioners, this has been 3 years in the making. And I was hoping when we first embarked on this that it would be 6 months in the making, and even then I wish it was less than that. We took a little bit of time during COVID to try and really target the trouble spots that we were having with the culinary and secondary water ordinance that we currently have on the books, as well as consider all of the different viewpoints of the different stakeholders. We've had a lot of conversations with different water entities, both secondary and culinary, learning what their constraints are, the standards at which they operate, and no two are the same. They all have something different. And so going with an ordinance or creating an ordinance that not only applies to a developer to provide culinary and secondary water in certain ways, and making it say that those certain ways need to be in compliance with whatever water secondary and culinary water entity is in the area, but also having an ordinance that brings the expectations of water entities into some common path. I think is a really good idea, because what that will do in the future is it's going to create consistency in the creation of water infrastructure, so that even if you have brand new water companies being created, you're going to see a lot more consistency across the board. If there were ever a catastrophic failure in a culinary water system, having some consistency across the board is going to make it a lot easier to retrofit and bring online with one of the neighboring systems, if possible or if needed at the time. And so I think it's a really good idea. I think the way that we've gone with both the secondary and the culinary water in this is going to help the public in the future in getting its access to culinary water. Now, the primary objective here was to protect the culinary water resources of the county. Secondary water was an incidental discussion point. We started the dialogue because of culinary issues. We've got a number of culinary water entities that are giving will-serve letters to developers on the condition that they don't use any of the culinary water outside. How to govern that has been a really big challenge, because the county, we're not in the culinary water business, and so being there as the authority approving development has been a really big challenge with all of the different diversity and variety of water regulations that exist between the different entities. So secondary water became an issue, and so much so that Hooper Irrigation submitted an application to change the code, to talk about how secondary water should and can be provided. And that's what led us to essentially the culmination of talking about both culinary and secondary in the same section of code. Essentially, the new proposal says you got to connect if you're within a certain distance, and that distance is 50 feet per lot in the subdivision. So if you're within 50 feet per lot of an existing culinary system, you've got to connect to that culinary system. Same standard for secondary systems. That's assuming those culinary and secondary systems are willing to provide for you. So if you're within that proximity, you have to connect. If you're outside of that proximity, either you can create your own system. So if you've got economy of scale, if you're a developer with economy of scale, you have enough lots that you want to bring online, that it makes sense for you to dig your own well and create your own community system, 15 connections or more, for culinary, or a community system for secondary. No limitation on what those, or no max on, or minimum on what those connections are. Then you can. If you are creating your own entity, but you're within the proposed expansion area of an existing entity, you have to create that entity, in essence, according to the standards of that existing entity, so that they can expand to you and connect and pick up your project. So the intention is not to create a whole bunch of small private companies in perpetuity. It's to create private companies that then a larger company that's already there can expand, connect, have an efficient connection, and consolidate resources. Consolidate resources, management, operations, maintenance. The economy of scale and taxpayer savings is, I don't know how to even enumerate it at this point. If you are outside of an expansion area of an existing water company, at that point, you would just need to comply with whatever the requirements are of state code to set up your culinary water authority and your secondary water company. If you can't realize as a developer, if you can't realize an economy of scale and create your own shared water system or community water system, then there's always the opportunity to access by private well. And so you'd be able to drill your well. We did put in a couple more stricter standards, said that weird, some stricter standards for access to a well. For example, commissioners, you wanted to see wet water at the point that they're ready to pull a building permit. And so they've got to perfect the well, they've got to go through the process of perfecting the well prior to pulling a building permit, so that there is access to water on site at that time. One of the things that was actually discussed by a few members in the public on over email with myself is, what happens if a developer wants to bring 20, 30 lots on, every single one of them is on an individual well, but he submits the information for the well to the Department of environmental quality, specifically the Division of Drinking Water and the state engineer, one at a time. Well, they're only going to review each well in singularity, just one at a time.
Not collectively.
And the state engineer may not be able to see the impact that a 20 or 30 lot subdivision all with wells is going to have if they're reviewing each well one at a time. So there's a stipulation in there that the developer would have to get approval for each of those wells through the state engineer all at the same time, just as a package. So trying to protect the water resources that way as well. We carved out exceptions to some of these really strict rules as well. We wanted to make sure there's enough water quantity on each lot. We talked about 60, we brought that down to 30, so 30% of the lot is assumed will be irrigated, unless, through secondary water, unless the applicant, whether it be the developer or a future landowner, demonstrates to the county that they are going to irrigate less. So here's our landscape plan. This is where our drip irrigation is going to be, and we're not going to have any grass. You know, they could do that, and at that point they would bring down whatever their water requirement is under our ordinance to whatever it actually needs to be on site. And we also carved out an exception for some of the wildland developments. If they're out in the wild area, the expectation would be that they would leave a lot of the vegetation that's there. They would still need to comply with the Wildland Urban Interface Code for fire purposes, wildfire purposes, and make sure they've got defensible space. But if they're not planning on planting anything, there would be no reason to require secondary water or outdoor water. So those kind of provisions and carve-outs have been, or provisions and exceptions have been added in here. It's a culmination of, like I said, years of work, and hopefully you guys feel like it's appropriate. The staff are recommending approval, and as were both planning commissions.
Great questions. Commissioner Frohr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I like this proposed change. First off, I think we've had a great discussion. Commissioner Jenkins set up a discussion with a lot of the water providers out west. I've had a discussion with a number of the water providers up in Ogden Valley. First off, it makes sense to let the culinary water companies make the decision if they're going to provide service based upon the secondary water requirement or the use of secondary water. I think this ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, gives some flexibility when you talk about water-wise landscaping. We have subdivisions going in that will require, on larger lots, that, you know, I'm talking 10, 20, 30 acre lots, that will really require little or no secondary water. And this gives an allowance for those to keep it in natural vegetation.
It does.
Which I think members of the public like, especially going through today's water history and what we see coming for this year. The more we can do as a county to encourage water-wise use and also encourage that as we look at development, rather than require a developer to come in and say, you have a 3 acre lot, we want that entire 3 acre water irrigated, which may or may not make sense. It gives some flexibility. So I support this, Mr. Chair.
Great. Commissioner Jenkins, any comments here?
The comments I have is I want to make sure the primary water districts understand that we're expecting them to regulate this. So we need to make sure that they have copies of this, and that when we pass this, which I assume we will today, that they're aware of that so they know their responsibility. That's my only concern here, Charlie. You know, we live in a different world right now. Water is becoming, you know, it was interesting, 22 years ago, 21 years ago, when I went to the legislature, they talked about how precious water was and how the day would come where we would have major shortages. And I remember I kind of laughed at that. I thought, these guys got their heads in their pockets. I say pockets because I don't want to talk the other place. I thought they had their heads. But anyway, now here we are, 21 years later, and it's exactly what's happening. We've got major shortages, and everybody views what they want to do with their lot differently, as do I. And so I'm all for accommodating this. I just don't want to be in a position where we're at before, where we had individuals come in here and said, look, we were sold this and we were shorted that and we didn't know it. I want to make sure that they understand what the developer expects their lot to be like when it's done.
Great comments. Thank you.
Bet. Thanks, Charlie.
I'm going to move, Commissioners, to item number 5 on this public hearing portion, which is the public hearing to discuss, take comment, and potentially take action on a county-initiated proposal to amend the subdivision ordinance to allow or acquire private streets in certain circumstances. That's incredibly broad, Charlie.
Sure is. The ordinance didn't fit on the agenda, so let me give you some detail there. So we've got a project in the Ogden Valley right now that the plan for the project has always been for it to be on private streets. The developer wasn't aware when they proposed the project that the county doesn't allow private streets unless you're in a master plan development. As we got looking at the possibility and the idea of having private streets, internally, the planning division and the engineering division had really great conversations about it because we were a little bit at odds. For example, in the engineering division, there's a little bit of sentiment that the more linear mile of street that we have, especially if they're too narrow or across potential landslide areas, the higher risk that the county has in terms of operations and maintenance of those streets. Whereas the planners, anytime you talk to a planner about a street, everything should be public everywhere so that everybody gets the benefit and access. Both of them are probably right. And I think there is a way to do both. So number one, as we plan for the future, we know that we're not receding in population. We're growing in population. Whether you're in the Ogden Valley or you're in the unincorporated western Weber, next year there's going to be more people. Unless there's a catastrophic element that comes in, we'll always be at least one more person larger the next year than we were the year before. And so we've got to plan for that. That's why you have planners. What does the Ogden Valley and Western Weber look like in 50 years, for example? So the Ogden Valley General Plan, when we were working on that with folks in the Ogden Valley back in 2016, there wasn't a broad consensus amongst the public for support of a transportation master plan. We did have a transportation master plan that we proposed. There was quite a bit of resistance to that idea. And so you don't see a lot of street connectivity even in the planning documents that exist. But 50 years from now, the AB3 zoning might not exist. It might not be able to exist given the fact that people continue to reproduce. Even our own internal population increases just from our birth rate would lend to that assumption. Also in the Ogden Valley, if we implement a transferable development right program that is successful, we know that there are going to be some areas where you're going to have a little bit more density than others. Not new density on the valley, in the valley floor, but moved density from an area that doesn't have access to streets or other resources or facilities into areas that does have access to streets and other county services. So what that essentially means is, in time, there is going to be a need for a network, a street network. If we've got cul-de-sacs, you take a large block maybe that's 2 or 3 miles around it, and cul-de-sacs that go to the interior, we're going to be creating communities in the future that might have more density than 1 unit to 3 acres that don't have connectivity to each other. So when Timmy in one subdivision wants to play with Johnny in the other one, his mom's got to drive him 2 miles even though it's a couple fences over. And so that's the kind of thing from a planning perspective we'd like to see avoided, and public streets is one way to do that. However, in the Ogden Valley, we've got 1 dwelling unit every 3 acres on the valley floor for most of the valley. Does that make a lot of sense to require public streets everywhere? No. And as we discussed with the potential basin rezone today, a dead-end street doesn't often provide a public good. More than often, or more often than not, provides just a good for those who are located on it. Unless there's a pedestrian access way at the end of the cul-de-sac or that dead-end street provides access to public land somewhere up that street, the benefit of that street is for those who live along that street. So what this ordinance does is it proposes to allow the creation of private streets as long as there is a metric, or excuse me, a mechanism put in place to preserves the county's opportunity or possibility of creating a public street along that in the future. So what it does is essentially it does exactly what our current code does now, where it says you've got to dedicate that space to the county as a potential potential public street in the future. But today, the operations, the installation, the maintenance can be used as a private street, where we'll let you put a gate up, we'll let you restrict access, you can put no trespassing signs, all kinds of stuff. The only thing the county would have associated with that private street is fee to the ground for possible connections. Now, imagine that happening 50 years down the road. The county finds that we've got full build out around this particular street, and it never connected, and there was never a need to connect it. At that point, the landowners would be able to come into the county and say, hey, do you still need this street? Because if you don't, we'd like you to transfer it into our name. So this keeps the opportunity for future street connectivity open while still allowing people to get the development of their liking or what they want today. So that's essentially what's being proposed here. Any questions or comments about that?
Commissioners, comments or questions on item number 5?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Question. So, you know, I like the idea of private streets. I've lived on a private street for a number of years. I like the idea that that it's up to the individuals using that street to pay for it, to plow it, to maintain it. Takes the burden off the taxpayers. But there's also the case to be made of connectivity, which I agree with, and there has to be a process in place that after saturation, whatever that may be, that road would have potentially in the future be made public, and or require those individuals to make that public, to bring it up to what I would call county standards. Does this ordinance allow that then, or address that? That's an issue we've talked about.
It does. So what it does is it requires essentially the street. Let's say it's a cul-de-sac, for example. You've got a cul-de-sac that extends whatever length it's designed to extend, and then ends in a turnaround, hammerhead or a cul-de-sac turnaround or whatever. We would require that to the right-of-way to be extended all the way to the edge of the subdivision so that it could stub into an adjacent property. Now that's currently in the subdivision code, and we currently in the subdivision code require you to build it to stub all the way to the property. So you can't create a street that would inhibit your neighbor's ability to develop, right? But what they could do under this is they could dedicate that stretch to the county and then use that stretch for the benefit of their own HOA until the county says, all right, now we're coming through. And so there would be that process set up. If the county says we're coming through, there may be some responsibility for the county to go in and patch all the holes and everything. But we'll already know that the street that's built there is built to county standard because that's still going to be the requirement. Build it to the public standard even though we're going to let you own, operate, use it privately until we say it needs to be public. If the owners come to the county and say, hey, we're paying the same amount of taxes as everybody else and we don't even get the benefit of a plow, we want you to take over the street. At that point, if it's not something that we see a huge public benefit in doing so, we would say to the landowners, you guys need to patch all the holes and you need to fix all the problems before we take it over, just like we do now. And we have a few private streets in the Ogden Valley where we have said that to the homeowners associations a couple of times in the past. So yes, there is a process there for them to become public. And the benefit is, if you pass something like this, the fee is already owned by the county. Whereas if you were to allow that subdivision to go through without fee of that stretch of land where the road is to be in the county's name, you'll have to buy it at whatever fair market price is in the future. So through the development process, the county gets to assume the fee to the property and then gift essentially the rights and responsibilities of use of that to the landowners until the county says we're ready.
So we've created the easement for the future.
Yep.
Okay, that's my number one concern, that we don't get ourselves in the position of a county having to go in and buy land to put in a road that we need in the future.
Right, and even more so, if we didn't show where it's reserved, someone might plop a house
Yeah,
right there.
right,
and we
which
don't wanna
gets
be
even more
tearing down
expensive,
houses.
yeah. Yeah, talk to UDOT about that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Commissioner Jenkins, any comments on this one? Great. Super. We're now to the public comment portion of our public hearing, which allows people to comment on the four items that were just presented regarding land use. Please limit your comments to those items on land use. Limit them to 3 minutes and address the commission when you're doing it. Those who wish to comment regarding anything that was just presented over the last little while may come forward now. And we ask that you state your name and the city or where you're from, please. Thank you. We'll do that now. Anyone here in the galley? I thought, Ron, you'd be coming, so.
Good morning. Well, I think it's almost afternoon right now.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Comment on H.
Do introduce yourself and where you live, please.
Ron Gleason, unincorporated, Weber County, Eden.
Thank you.
On the public versus private road, one other thing I think which should be considered is recreation uses. Up in the Upper Valley, more and more people are on bicycles and other forms of transportation, and we like to have roads go on, and we're trying to find alternatives to the state roads or the busy roads. So the ability to have access to roads to ride, even sometime if it's a cul-de-sac, to add some mileage or add some vertical feet and all that, we take advantage of. Specifically, I know you had a discussion about Legacy Ranch and a private versus public road. When that road goes in, if it's public, I'll guarantee you many of us will use that road to ride our bicycles on instead of Old Snow Basin Road because of the shape of Old Snow Basin Road and the amount of traffic on it. So I think it's another consideration to think about of your private versus public roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Great. Anyone online, Shelley? Ms. Menzies, go ahead, please.
Good morning. I think it's just morning. I'd like to address the culinary and secondary water ordinance, and I'd like to thank the diligent work of the planning department, particularly Charlie Hewitt. I believe that while the ordinance as presented and recommended by both planning commissions, it may not be perfect, but I think it's a huge improvement, and I just commend it to your attention and ask for your support in getting this thing on the books. I believe we are continuing to have problems with developers coming forward with developments that have not got the water fully sorted out from a legal and technical standpoint, and I think this ordinance will help prevent that in the future. So thank you for your time, gentlemen, and I ask you to support this new ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Menzies. Mr. Joyce, go ahead, please, sir.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. And I just want to publicly thank all of you for your continued interest and effort in this. As Charlie mentioned, I think the first time I bugged you guys was about 3 years ago. You're probably rolling your eyes like, Mr. Joyce again, really? But I'll publicly commend Charlie as well. Tremendous amount of effort with this, and just agree with Miranda greatly. Really, really complicated subject. And so, you know, if approval of the water land, of the culinary and secondary water land use code is approved today, it will be a win. It will be 1,000 times better than what we have today. I do want to bring to the attention to the commissioners, though, there is still one situation that I don't feel is addressed in this land use code. It specifically is the situation that I brought before you about 3 years ago, the one that I am personally in the development that I live in. There will be more Silver Summit estates. If this code is passed as is, I would say that maybe what we should do is get this in the books, but I'd ask that you be open to further comment in the future about continued iterations of this code. There is an opportunity to address when there is no culinary provider and or well is used for culinary, yet there is access to secondary water. and where that secondary water possibly could be provided by pressurized infrastructure from ditch water, which is the case, again, what I presented to you guys about 3 years ago. That condition is not addressed in this code. And so, I don't know if you remember, Commissioner Harvey, a long time ago, you said, I want Paul Jr. to be happy. A little joke there. Paul Jr. still isn't happy for this specific case. But again, wanted to commend everybody. Thank you, all of you, and Charlie, and all your efforts here. And just, also comment that 1,000 times better, but there's still an opportunity to continue tweaking this a little bit as we move forward. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. One moment before we take Brent Edwards' comments. Paul, I hope you see this as getting some cake but not ice cream, and I know you like both on your dessert, so we'll just go to there. Mr. Edwards, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioners. Brent Edwards from Taylor. I just would like to thank the Planning Department, especially Charlie, on the work on this. It's been a long time in the making. A lot of hours have been put into this. A lot of meetings with the Commissioners and so forth, and I think we finally got a good grasp on this code. We're headed in a good direction, so I just want to say thanks to you guys as county commissioners as well as the planning staff for all the work on this. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Any others, Shelley? You've done good handling that. Seeing no others in the thing, commissioners, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our public hearing and reconvene a public meeting.
So moved.
Have a motion?
Second.
And a second. I'll place that motion for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great. We're now back in our public meeting, Commissioners, and this meeting is to consider action on those 4 items that were just discussed or presented. The first one is listed under item 8, under H2 on our agenda, which is a request for approval I think that's a request to amend Weber County zone map to rezone approximately 5.0 acres from the CVR-1 and CV-2 zones to the FR3 zone at approximately 949 East, Highway 39. We talked a little bit about the 3 options that were available to us. One was to leave it the way it is. Another one was to take the Planning Commission's approach or to take the staff approach, which is slightly a modification which the applicant has agreed to do. So, Commissioners, I'll entertain comment at this time regarding that.
Mr. Chair.
Sir?
Just a comment, and I unfortunately missed the petitioner's response, but I think we all received a number of emails from concerned citizen urging us, at least the ones I read, not to do the rezone on this particular piece of property, which, again, I respect, but this property zoned right now for a lodging, hotel. It's been that way for as long as I can remember it in the valley, since that developed, and that piece of property was zoned for a hotel or lodging quite a ways before the neighboring subdivision. So, and I think it's clear that under the current zone, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, that they actually would have the ability to do exactly what they have proposed with the addition of a small amount of commercial space without any regulatory oversight in terms of rental, in terms of what we view as proper regulation of short-term rentals. Is that correct?
That is. The only thing that it would require essentially is a conditional use permit. Incidentally, the same thing that we have to get through the FR3 zone.
Right.
So, yeah, without development agreement or anything like that, so you wouldn't be able to apply new rules.
Okay. So my question is, Mr. Chair, I don't know if the public is aware that fully aware that could take place without a development agreement, in which case they may change their attitude about the rezone.
That was made in the presentation. That was made aware.
Okay.
Yeah, and they became aware of that. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions.
So I would just like to make a comment here, and I don't know if you heard this before you left, Commissioner, but they said that what's really defining or holding this to 13 units is their connection to the sewer.
Sewer capacity.
Yeah, that's really what's holding it back. So that being the case, may I go, Mr. Chair?
Please, I'd appreciate it.
The only problem I have here is I find myself voting against the Planning Commission again. And I don't want to do that. I mean, I respect the time and effort these people put into this, but they've gone ahead here now and said, well, we are for the rezone, but with no short-term rentals. And of course, that's the reason they're doing it, and that's the zoning they've got. And so I question whether they could even do it. But Mr. Crockett emailed me and says they can do it. They want to set that aside. But I just can't bring myself to support this because it does away with short-term rentals. And so I'm going to be a no vote, just so you know.
And if I could add something, the law allows you to do that, but as the legislative body, you are the ones that ultimately make the determination as to whether that is a wise decision or not. And so if you decide not to do that, that's just fine.
Mr. Chair, question, maybe this goes to council.
Okay.
I believe we do have the option to place this on hold for a period of time until such time as a development agreement might be agreed to by the commission and the developer?
Sure,
Would that be a allowable motion at this point in time?
I'm not aware of a legal requirement that requires you to take action on this day.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion.
Okay.
So, with that, I would make the motion that we hold this action item, H2, dealing with the rezone, until such time as the developer and the county have an opportunity to meet with members of the community that is involved with that and see if they could come up with a acceptable development agreement. When I say acceptable, that would be to both the community and to the developer, with the ideas, and I think that I'm pretty much on record on short-term rentals to say our issues need to be addressed. Enforcement, parking, garbage. Before I'm an advocate for short-term rentals, those all have to be addressed. It appears to me this could be a model for short-term rentals as we move forward. So I think we have the opportunity here to really do a test project in the event that we could come together on that. If we can't come together as a community and as a developer, then I would support Commissioner Jenkins' position that I would be in favor of just the zone remaining and let chips fall where they may. So I'd propose that motion, Mr. Chair.
There's your motion. Is there a second to that motion?
There's a second, but I would like to get a comment from the developer on this. Sitting in the audience.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Before you make it, Mr. Myers, would you mind coming and addressing the commission? But while you're doing that, I think it'd be fair, since both of my colleagues have made comments, in fairness to the public, in fairness to you, sir, I think it's fair that I make a statement, so you know where we are. I love the fact that the public's reached out to us. They trust us enough and care enough to comment to us. And I've had a lot of comments, and they weren't those cookie cutter type comments where somebody writes it and then everybody copies it and just pastes their name. They were all individually crafted comments, well thought out. It was really wonderful. This is a change for the valley up there, which a lot of them care for very much. And so because they were all individually crafted, because there's a lot of care for that area, I'm obligated, out of my own morals, to listen. But I also respect the fact that we've had many, many developers come to us, and you've been very good as far as listening, and I commend you for working with this piece here. I really love that you've accommodated this, that, or the other with these comments and things. And so while the easiest thing for me to do right now would be to deny. But I don't think, based on, I came here today thinking that's where I was going to go, just deny it. But I don't think it's the best, based on what we've heard, to do that, because the management piece, the parking piece, having the offsets to make the project work for you, but also work for the community, is really important. But that becomes a little bit cumbersome. While it's legal, it becomes a little bit cumbersome here. So I love the direction that Commissioner Frohr has given with the second. I think you're seeing independently thought of, but a united commission on this, just to be fair to you, sir. So please, what are your comments based on what Commissioner Jenkins said with regards to that?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I think we had a very quality meeting last Friday. The planning department hosted it. We had 3 representatives from the neighborhood, and I felt that it was a pretty good meeting. I also today had another visit with one of those community members. It's important to remember, and this was brought up at the Friday meeting, these single-family homes are probably going to have a price tag right around $1.2 million. We want a quality neighborhood. We do not want Lot 4 to take away from the enjoyment of Lot 5. So it's not just the surrounding neighborhood, but within our community itself, we are committed to having a quality neighborhood. And so when the neighborhood asked last Friday, could we have a single management company that would be over this HOA, of course, that's how we would want it. That they'll govern the landscaping, the snow removal, the overnight rentals, so that it's all being through that one central company on that. And over the years, the HOA of our community would have the opportunity to change to other management companies, but still staying with one at a time. Your points last Monday on parking was very well received. It led to a quick meeting with the planning department so that we could better address that, and also the snow removal. Again, we want a quality neighborhood. This is not the only project that we're going to be doing in the valley. We want to have a good reputation with the community and with the commission. Is there anything else I could answer?
So may I?
Please. Yeah, because I think you're about to say what I'm feeling.
Yeah. If we approve this today, the way it's been given to us by the Planning Commission, you will not be allowed to have short-term rental in there.
May I? I'm going to jump in. That's one of the options. The other option is to deny. The third option was to approve it, and with some additional rules to the property. We have the authority to put some additional rules on the property, which would be to limit the number of bedrooms, but more so to have enough parking, make sure there's enough parking required, make sure that we regulate how often the short-term rentals or a management company there, so the STRs are managed, and we would require the 24/7 management company. But we could also require offsets for snow removal and the hill vegetation that was mentioned by Charlie, and no on-street or no parking on the streets or those little areas there too. So we could do that, but like our council said, we can do that legislatively, but it would be a little more cumbersome, but we could do that. So we could say we could approve. So the third option is approve the rezone with these conditions.
Then we find ourselves voting against our Planning Commission again.
Only on part of it. They voted to rezone, but so they've given us two things on the Planning Commission to do. And those two, to me, also conflict. One is to approve, but don't allow STRs.
Right.
So the planning, I would say we're going to...
That's my whole point.
So we wouldn't be taking the whole piece of the planning commission. We would be approving it, but we would be putting some conditions on there. I say it how you want. That's how I see it.
Well, when you say we're not going to take the whole thing, well, that's the whole thing.
Well,
there's only one thing. They approved it without an STR.
Before you go there, Charlie, for me, it's like I'm going to have some roast beef, but I don't get the potatoes. How's that on the dinner?
Yeah, I view that as you move that plate away, and you're really going to eat this plate over here.
Okay, however you want. I'm going to liken it to Sunday, dear. That's all right. Charlie, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioners. So the option that you're mentioning right now, Mr. Chairman, we would request that you table it. I do believe the option you're mentioning right now is the motion that has been made by Commissioner Ferror.
That was my motion to hold. Did that get second, by the way?
It did.
Okay.
So
it's on the plate.
The motion on the table is to hold, not to approve.
Right.
That's correct.
And then at some future date, if in fact the developer and the community could come together on that list that you just made, whatever that happens, we could come back and either say yay or nay.
Mr. Myers, would that work for you? I don't mean to slow bake this.
Yes, we support the motion, and we will work together on preparing that development agreement. Our second option would be that you would deny our request, and we will build under the existing zone within the building code as it requires.
Understand.
Do you have a preference for those two? Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Do you have a preference, given those two options? Because that's exactly where I'm at.
Your motion.
Okay, thank you.
Preference.
Great. That makes that easy. So I'm going to call for the motion on this, and this is a roll call vote for this. This is ordinance number 16 as presented. So Fatima, if you'd conduct that roll call now, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Sorry, just to clarify, we didn't pass an ordinance. We're just tabling the item, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And then if I have a question for planning, if that's okay, is there anything that prevents the applicant from proceeding simultaneously with their other application that they have going before the Planning Commission tonight?
No, I don't think so. I think all the provisions of the CVR1 zone can be met. And so I think they can go ahead and subdivide and develop under the CVR1 zone. Changing it to the FR1 zone only changes the uses. And so instead of requiring some commercial space or a commercial lodge or whatever, making that change in the future would essentially allow them just to have residence.
Great.
Terrific. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Commissioners. We'll move on to item number H3 under number 7, which is ordinance number 17. This is a request for approval of an applicant-initiated proposal to amend the M3 zone to add shooting range and training course as an allowed use. Commissioners, any comment?
It would be ordinance 16 because we didn't approve it on the other one.
Thank you very much, Fatima, for the correction. Correction noted. Commissioners' comments, or I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd move to approve action item H3.
Ordinance number 16. I have a motion to approve action item number H3. Is there a second? I will second that motion. Fatima, go ahead with the roll call.
Commissioner Farrar?
Aye.
Commissioner Jenkins?
No.
And Chair Harvey?
Aye. Thank you. Commissioners, item number H4 is a request for approval of a county-initiated proposal to amend the subdivision ordinance to better address culinary and secondary water as prevented. This is ordinance number 17. Commissioners' comments. I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make that motion to approve this.
We have a motion.
I'm happy to second.
We have a motion and a second.
Can I comment to that?
And a comment, please.
Yeah, I understand this doesn't cover absolutely everything, but I do also agree that this is considerably better than where we've been, and it's a work in process, and so let's get this through, and we'll work on the rest.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
I appreciate that, too. Thank you very much. Fatima?
Commissioner Farrar?
Aye.
Commissioner Jenkins?
Aye.
Chair Harvey?
Aye, thank you. We'll now move to item H5, Commissioners, which is a request for approval of a county-initiated proposal to amend the subdivision ordinance to allow or require streets in certain circumstances, as presented by Mr. Ewert. It's ordinance number 18. Commissioners' comments? Hearing no comments, entertain a motion.
Motion to approve ordinance 18.
Have a motion?
I'll second that.
Great. I'll place that motion for vote. Fatima?
Commissioner Faur?
Aye.
Commissioner Jenkins?
Aye.
Chair Harvey?
Aye. That motion now carries. Thank you very much. Commissioners, we'll now hear our public comments, which is item E that has been moved between item H and I for the public. This is an opportunity for you to address the commission. Your comments are asked to be not more than 3 minutes, and if you find yourself repeating one another, then we'll ask that you move on to another topic. But 3 minutes is about where we're going to be today. Thank you for accommodating the request earlier. It appears we have someone at the lectern, so that I may ask before that person that's just so boldly moved to the front, if we have someone online who would like to comment first. Shelley? No, so we'll move to you, sir, if you'll state your name and the city or area where you live, please.
Ron Gleason, unincorporated, Weber County, Eden.
Thank you.
Last week or the week before came to my attention that the National Forest Service has a proposal to move a helipad from the Morgan County Airport to the Ogden Valley, specifically right on Highway 39 at the bottom of Trapper's Loop. If you get to the bottom of Trapper's Loop, on the north side of 39, they own approximately 12 acres there. I know some people who work at this heliport. I've got a little bit of background of it, but they have the need to spend some money and get away from renting the facility that they're now using at the Morgan Airport. The question I have is, one, as commissioners, are you aware of this project? Two, have you been able to give any input to it? And three, as a federal agency, are they able to do what they want regardless of the local ordinances that are in place? Specifically, there is a land use ordinance in the valley of no heliports below 6,300 feet. This is on the valley floor somewhere around 5,000 feet. Also, other ordinance, whether it be the sign, lighting, and so on, would they have to be followed, or can they just do their own thing? The second thing, and I'm responding to this to the Forest Service because we have till the end of the week, is making sure they understand the longer-term picture. Across the street from them, as part of the approved master plan for Snow Basin, there is equestrian facilities, recreational field, which would be donated to the county at some point, and commercial and residential areas that will be very close to this facility if they build it. So again, my questions were, are you familiar with this? Have you had any discussions with them? And as a federal agency, can they just do what they want? Thank you.
Commissioners, I've written those down, and let's answer all those comments when we have our time for commissioners' comments at the end, if that's okay.
Be happy to.
Please, thank you. Great. One moment, please. Next, go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen. We come to you today.
Give me your name, please, and the city,
This is Victoria Dortzbeck. I'm an inhabitant of Ogden. We come to you today on a most important and grave matter. I am an American state national per Title 8, Section 1101, A21 and 23. Therefore, I enjoy limited diplomatic immunity. Many of the people in this room are state nationals or are close to being state nationals. That means we are not subjects to government. We are not municipal servants. Per Article 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, it's an international treaty you may have never heard about before. All people have the right of self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. Let me tell you about the hierarchy of law. You see, God created man. Man created government. And government, which is a fiction, created citizens, another word for municipal servants. Again, we the people created government. God's almighty law is superior law, meaning there are no laws above God's superior law. The Constitution and the international treaties are supreme law. Corporate bylaws, on the other hand, include all statutes, ordinances, codes, and corporate policies of the county. All statutes, ordinances, codes, and corporate policies that conflict with superior or supreme laws are color of law and are null and void. Refer to the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution. We, the people, are remembering who we are as God made us, to take dominion over the earth just as God commanded in Genesis 1:26 through 28. We are taking dominion over the land, over the air, and over the water. We are here today with the intent to educate our public servants and the people on the fraud that has been perpetrated on the American people by a de facto government. In the spirit of educating you and the people, we are reading a second Declaration of Independence by the 50 United States of America, allegedly signed by President Donald Trump, July 4th, 2020, to the new Republic of the United States. By the way, this is a 7-page document that 11 here will be reading from for approximately 33 minutes of your time. Trusting our cause is just, and having prayed for the fortitude to brave the spiritual wickedness in high places, we citizens of America make this announcement to the shareholders of U.S. Corp., including the City of London, the British Crown,
Good, thank
the
you.
Vatican,
Next.
and their operatives in medical, government, and society.
A second declaration
If
of
you'd give your name and city,
Oh, sorry.
please.
June Reese, Harrisville.
Thank you, June.
A second Declaration of Independence by the 50 United States of America, with the utmost respect and admiration for the founders of America and the framers of the original Declaration of Independence. The American people humbly emulate their thoughtful, measured response to certain perpetual and ascending tyranny and deposition. We, too, believe it is moral obligation of those privileged with knowledge and opportunity to work on behalf of the people, that the people are served best when their benefactors choose unity over division, nationalism over globalism, sovereignty over submission, and liberty over oppression, that all human beings are equal in their innate value, that America was founded under God, and that our God-given rights may not be revoked, suspended, neglected, or abridged without due process. What distinguishes the Second Declaration of Independence from its progenitor is the object from which we seek independence. Regrettably, to our great misfortune, shame, and dismay, and despite the recurrent warnings and accorded safeguards, a cabal of foreign investors and privateers have managed to gain possession of our land, our wealth, our labor, our well-being, and our future, and even our children. Although history has become muddied with varied interpretations of cardinal events, including the surreptitious adoption of a second corporate constitution and uncertain ratification of several amendments destructive to the people, it matters only that one or more alien groups lay claim to America and its assets. Rather than speculate on motives and weigh unprofitably to biased accounts, unverifiable information, and plenteous theories and opinions, we engage a perfect solution wherein we exact independence from all claimants, past and present, proclaimed, identified, or veiled. As such, the usurpers named in this declaration are representative and not specific or exhaustive, regardless of supposed ancestry, preceded instrument, or process. Although simply enumerating transgressions and usurpations would suffice to justify insultory, recounting significant events reveals important facts that are missing from history. These forgotten facts add insight, perspective, and clarity, illuminating our best way forward.
Thank you, June. That's 3. Thank you. Next.
Morning, gentlemen. I'm Jennifer from South Ogden.
Hi, Jennifer.
Good
Go
morning.
ahead.
The inevitable Civil War destroyed America's economy, ripped families apart, and cast a questionable shadow on the future of a once promising nation. America was in trouble financially and needed a massive infusion of capital to get back on its feet. A cabal of nation-building venture capitalists from Europe agreed to finance America's recovery, but it demanded an active role in government to ensure their investment. In 1871, mired in debt, Congress worked out a partnership. In exchange for boundless financial support, the foreign investors handled America's administrative needs. Although initially it seemed to be an innocuous concession, the consequences of allowing the nation-building venture capitalists to conduct America's business beyond the protections of the U.S. Constitution proved catastrophic. The investors quickly embedded operations throughout the foreign-owned corporate government, and Washington, D.C. began serving the interest of America's financiers over the people. In 1871, America effectively lost its independence, and the nation-building capitalists became our new masters. By the early 1900s, the foreign investors that bankrolled America controlled the major newspapers and news services, enabling them to shape what is reported and how it is to be framed. They had to cover their tracks before being exposed and repudiated by the people. The nation-building capitalists worked to soften America's imperturbable, elevated system of government. The founders had formed a constitutional republic instead of a democracy, specifically to prevent citizens in the majority from oppressing those in the minority. By doing what is best for their district or state, rather than enforce the majority will, representatives serve all citizens equally, eliminating the noise, division, and violence intrinsic to democracies. Being in control of the narrative, the foreign investors ingeniously promoted the fallacy that America is a democracy, trusting that the deception would lead to unrest and chaos that would make America vulnerable, creating additional opportunities for infiltration and manipulation. In 1913, the foreign investors established the Anti-Defamation League to slander anyone who exposed them and their infiltration into American politics. And of course, that was the establishment of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. By the way of the 16th Amendment, the foreign investors were granted the authority to tax the American people directly, something expressly prohibited by the original Constitution. That the people would willingly subject themselves to forced
Jennifer.
confiscation of their property.
Time's up.
Yes, sir. Of their property, their labor.
Jennifer, please respect 3 minutes. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank
Chair?
you.
Thank you.
Mr.
I'll
Chair?
recognize Commissioner Jenkins.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We're adjourned.